I reminded you that you are perfect, would you argue me down or step into your perfection? Welcome to Perfect Mode, where there are no excuses, no expectations, and we explore the world without limitations. I'm Jay Clay, rapper, the spiritual teacher, with my co-host Troy Washington, your friendly neighborhood realtor. Let's be real, so let's be perfect. Everything, anything, plenty things, perfect. Everything, anything, plenty things, perfect mode. Everything, anything, plenty things, perfect mode. Everything, anything, plenty things, perfect mode. Perfect mode, perfect mode, perfect mode, perfect mode, perfect mode, perfect mode, perfect mode. Everything, anything, plenty things, perfect mode, perfect mode. Everything, anything, plenty things, perfect mode.
Perfect.
What up? Welcome to Perfect Mode. Welcome to Perfect Mode. And first off, we want to start by saying that we love y'all. We're grateful for the opportunity to be here, share our thoughts in the way that we see life, and hopefully helping you realize that you are perfect. And the reason why I can unapologetically say that without question, without doubt, is because I know that you are one of one. Numero uno. You cannot be duplicated or replicated. And the only reason you would look at yourself and say that you're not perfect is if you're looking at someone else and saying, I'm not them. And it's yours truly, Troy Washington, your friendly neighborhood realtor. And I have my boy Jay Clay, spiritual rapper and teacher. And we about to get over here and talk about the answer is always, not sometimes, always in your questions. What up, Jay?
What a happy day to all my perfect people on this perfect day. It's your boy, Troy Washington, Jay Clay. Yeah, man, it's another happy Sunday, another topic I'm happy to jump into because we always got questions, man. We always have all these questions about the world, about why things are how they are. How come I can't have this and they have this? Why am this? Why is that? And the answer is actually in the question. Like when you really look at the question you're asking, the answer is there, and it's something that I think we need to bring to light.
So I want to say this, just my thoughts, so that way you can hear them real quick. And again, I don't know where we're going to go with this, but I just want to tell you, but two things came to my mind when I saw the question or when I saw the topic. Now, the first thing is me and Jay Clay, we both have a mastermind that we do with each other on a daily basis, in a sense, right? And sometimes Jay Clay will come in and he'll be like, hey, Troy, what are your thoughts on this? I know you probably gonna say this, but I want to know what your thoughts are on this. Or he might come in and say, I got a question, this. And then maybe about 20 minutes or 30 minutes later, he'll come back and say, never mind, don't worry about it. I figured it out, or I got the answer. Now, that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about this topic. The second thing that comes to my mind is, and again, we may not even go here, but it's relationship based or not necessarily boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, but any relationships. And what I've seen happen more often than not, when somebody's in a sense plagued in a relationship, meaning something's not to their liking, they will come to somebody else and be like, what do you think I need to do about this? And what I've heard over and over again, and I've even said this to somebody, is like, you already know what you want to do, or you already know the answer. You're just asking me to get confirmation. And so those were the things that kind of highlighted in my brain when I saw this topic. But what you got, Jay?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's all of the above. It's everything. No matter the question that we ask, it's a lot apparent there. Like it's one, we already know what we want to happen. Like you said, we are looking for validation. Sometimes though, we don't realize we're giving power over to the one we asked the question to. Even if we think we know what they're gonna say, or even if we already have our mind made up. And it's the power of transfer is the key thing, because since again we've given definition to everything around us, we've given meaning to everything. We are the creators. We get to set forth what the world actually means to us. And when we start to really look at the questions we're answering, we start to see why our life is the way it is, whether it's to our liking or not.
So I want to talk about myself real quick in regards to this topic and how I feel like how it's affected me. Now, the craziest part is when I first saw it, I told you the things I highlighted, but that was in regards to everybody else. And then when it came to me, the thing that I thought to myself was, do I really ask a lot of questions? And then I realized that I don't really ask a lot of questions. Now, this is the crazy part about it. I I've recognized it, but I didn't really realize it before today, right? But before, when I recognized it, I always deemed it as a shortcoming. And what I mean by that is like I would always say things like, I didn't ask questions because I didn't want anybody to think that I didn't know something or I was not putting forth an effort or all of these different things that I kind of made it a bad deal, right? But again, versus highlighting the good part about it. And to your point or to the point of the topic, a lot of times the reason why I never ask questions is because I gave myself an opportunity to figure it out, or I gave myself an opportunity to have an in-depth, deep dive into something where I was able to maybe gain more than anybody could have ever given me because even as simple as a question could be, there was never an answer that they could have given me to satisfy the appetite that I was looking for. Go ahead, Jay.
Right. And that's what I was gonna say too. Like even in that, like sometimes the lack of and I'm not saying this is you. Sometimes the lack of asking a question is because a person may not trust the one who would be answering. So like if I asked a bricklayer about making a straw house, I probably wouldn't ask that because I wouldn't necessarily trust the answer that would be given. So that's part of the whole ordeal. And I guess so. Okay, so check this out. I'll speak on me. One thing I noticed is that all my questions I've ever had have been answered, and they continue to be answered. Now, it took more time back in the day. Like sometimes it would be years later I would receive an answer to a question. Like I'm talking a lot of years later, like childhood questions getting answered. But lately, like this past year, it's been maybe 2 days at the most. Like you said in your example, I'll come ask a question and then something happened. It happened in multiple forms. It could be I get a flash of an idea. It could be something on an email. It could be something on YouTube, social media. Somebody can just say something to me. It's many ways, but the only time where I might not accept the answer given right away is if I feel I'm too tied to it and I want a specific answer. Like I'm asking a question, but I'm really saying I want this specific thing, but I'm not even asking that to receive that, which is crazy.
So one thing that I want to highlight is the fact that you said sometimes when you ask the question, it can come a lifetime away. It don't have to, it can be 30 years down the line. And I know this might seem silly, but funny enough, one of the things, shouts out to my cousin Rhonda, man. I appreciate you joining us today. But again, as a kid, we grew up listening to Bone Thugs and Harmony, right? And I mean, I know it might sound funny, but I always wanted to know what they said. And I think you did too, and most people did. And we would look on all of these lyric sites, but everybody would have different stuff. So nobody really knew. But it is a question that was posed internally. And again, we asked and we can never get the correct answer, right? But the crazy part is the answers have come back to me in the way that it can only be the right answer over years worth of time, which I'm not going to say how, but I'm just to go along with the point that you're making. I agree, and I like the fact not pressing it, just trusting that. And I think that sometimes when you ask people, and again, I don't want to say that I'm in here advocating for not to. I know what our topic is. If you feel compelled to ask somebody a question, ask it, right? But what I would also say is give yourself an opportunity to be as great as you are, right? Because you're right, like we're looking for validation because we don't feel validated ourselves sometimes. And we don't want to trust. You talk about trusting somebody else, you don't even want to trust yourself with the wisdom that's been bestowed upon you in the life that you're living to give yourself a chance to answer. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, and it's right, and it's a lot of dichotomies within this because like you shouldn't question things, but at the same time, ask and you shall receive.
Real
And
talk.
the same way, like I love answering people's questions when I have knowledge that they need in that particular time. I love it, and so at the same time, I wouldn't want to rob someone of that opportunity. And the thing is, and I guess let me give a good example of a question where an answer is in it. So there's this game I play on my phone, and it's like it's a group game 5-on-5. I had to make a rule in myself. If I lose 2 in a row, I can't play for like another couple hours because you just get caught in that. But like for example, I might say, "Why do I keep losing?" So so my answer can only be one for in favor of loss. It has no
Yeah.
mention of winning. It has nothing that leads to winning. It's all about focusing on the loss. But the thing is, I want to win. So, I might want to say, well, why do I keep winning? But then I don't believe that myself because I just lost. So it's like there's an art to asking the right question to get the answer that you desire, but be careful not to have one pointed away from what you want.
So this is the other crazy thing that came to my head as well is when you said answering the question sometimes can take that away from somebody, giving them the opportunity to work through things too. Because I'm the same way. I love being what I consider to be a knowledgeable person. I feel prideful when somebody comes to me with a question that I know the answer to. You know what I mean? But again, there is a certain amount of joy that they can get if they figure it out on their own. Now, the thing that I think about again, having a kid, so I have a 5-year-old, his name is Brody. And then I have adults all in my life. Sometimes adults come to me and they ask me a question and I know that they know the answer to it, right? And so everything in me is like that's how I feel, but I will answer it, right? It's a behavior. Now, the reason why I know it is because I brought up Brody is because Brody does the same thing all the time. So a rule that I have in my house is I'm not answering questions that I know you know the answer to. I'm not gonna do it. And so what I would ask him, or what I would say to him is, you know the answer to that. He'll ask me something that I know. Now again, I know that some stuff I have to still to, but some stuff I just know maybe because I've taught him before, or maybe he's expressed it in a certain way where I know that he has the dynamics of his life to be able to figure it out. And so he tries me a lot. He'll be like, "Well, Dad, what's this?" And I'll be like, I'm not answering that because I know you know the answer to it. And then he'll state the answer in like a question. So it's this, huh? And I'll be like, Brody, you know the answer to that, you know, and then he'll be like, okay, it's this, right? And the thing that the line that I draw is there are adults they do the exact same thing. And I I can't do them like my son, which I can, but sometimes I'll be wanting to be like, I can't answer the question because you already know it. But if you dig deep, you can gain it. And not only that, I think that teaches people to develop a level of confidence in themselves, right? Again, not just the gratitude that you feel for yourself for figuring it out, but the confidence in knowing that I can step into something and just my answer is good enough. And I know that it's something that's a work in progress because even me in the business that I do in real estate, and the crazy thing is I'm saying this and it's just hitting me in my head. I always say I know that I don't have all the answers. Like me saying it now. It's just like Troy, you got to stop saying that too. But even when I talk to a client, I always tell them if you ever have a question, ask me. I may not have all the answers, but I'll figure it out. But the reality of it is, I have source, which is an answer to all the questions. So just ask me any question, and I have it. Right? May not be when you want, but it might be down the line. But go ahead, Jay.
Right. So like, okay, So yeah, it's so much that goes into the question asking, because like you said, like two more minds come together, they form like a mastermind, or as the Bible says, like he is present. Like there's an extra mind that's greater than the sum total of your two individual minds. And so sometimes questions are an opportunity. It's an opportunity to connect with the person that you're actually asking and find the answer to this question that either you might not actually know. But at the same time, I've used questions to help people realize what they actually know, because they might not be aware of it in the moment. But I've also seen people, and I'll admit I've done this in my youth, use use questions to almost gaslight people in a way, because again, when you ask the question, you have an idea of the answer already. So it's like the question and the answer are one. And as soon as we realize that, it can change the type of questions that we ask, and it can change the kind of information that we have access to. So like for instance, we talk about on the show a lot being in the present moment. And a lot of the time when people think of knowledge, they think of knowledge gathering and hoarding. But the truth is, in that moment of being asked, you have total access to what you need in that moment. Like what you have for the answer is the answer.
So I want to touch on the part when you were talking about sometimes when asking question is a way for two people, like collaborative efforts, which I love that thought process. And the reason why I say that is because anybody can come to me and ask me how to make $1 million, right? But that is definitely not their answer, because there's so many different elements that's tied to that. Like, I don't know what you do. I don't know the dynamics of your business. Like, I don't know, but when we talk about collaborative efforts, if I come to you and I say, Jay, how can we make $1 million, right? Now, when you say we're trying to figure out a pathway together, that's when the question, I feel like, is a pertinent question, because now it's like, how do we want to do this? What are the tools we're going to use, to build something? Um, and I guess just piecing it out. But also, when we go back to me in real estate, like, people hire me because they have me as an expert in my field. So my expectation is not for them to come to me and be like, Troy, how much should I pay for an option fee? They don't look at option fees all day. So, I don't expect them to know that answer. Shouts out to my sister Amy. She says knowledge is the experience and the choice is the answer. Knowledge is the experience and the choice is the answer. I agree.
Love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, and it's the reason why, like, I never shy away from asking questions. Some may just be to myself, some may be out, but when I say to myself, it's more I'm asking God. And yeah, and I'm not to say that I'm God Himself, but I am a part of God, as we all are. So we have that direct access. But the reason I ask questions even to people is because it opens up a gateway, like it opens up you can say a portal or whatever, that allow the person you ask to answer it, which is why, again, when I come to Troy on Marco Polo app, I can ask him something. I will receive an answer from the joint minds of us too. I've done this with other people as well. Like if I had a technical question, I'm doing some programming, I'll email my programmer friend. 5 minutes later, disregard his email, I got the answer. And it's because at the same time, I have total trust in the person that I'm asking a question to. It's not like I'm just asking to be asking, because some people do that. And in that way, they're kind of squandering their ability to get an answer by just filling the space with questions.
So to your point, key words for me are, when I ask, I have total trust in the person that I'm asking to give me, what I'm looking for. And I think when I think about the mentality of perfect mode is, number one, starting to have total trust in you, in yourself, or me having total trust in myself, or anybody that's listening. And so my challenge is, like, it's not to say that we don't want to be dependable on other people or use that combined mind, but the practice of having total trust in yourself. And that doesn't mean that you're always going to have the full, because again, there's a level of answer here, right? A lot of times I don't ask questions because the level of detail that I'm looking for in an answer I don't know that it's something that anybody can give me because there's personal emotion tied to it. There's a bunch of different elements that kind of hover around it. And I think that, first asking myself the question to answer some of those questions. So that way, when I do ask the question to you, that's what's going to allow me to be open to receive what you have, whether you give it to me or not. But that's kind of how I think about it. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. And so the thing about questions, so I'll say this, like, because again, like you said, we have all the answers, like we really do. We just don't know it. We just don't allow ourselves to access to it, like because we've given that power away. Um, there are some questions I wanted to know that at the same rate, I couldn't trust anyone with the answer because it's like it might be beyond their belief system or expertise. But this is a judgment on my part. But I still ask the question, like, man, I wonder how can this be or how was this formed? And the latest time I did that, it was 2 nights ago I did that. And then last night I got something that led me to the answer, but the answer it led me to was that all of my theories and speculations were correct in a sense. I just didn't trust myself with that information. I didn't trust that the source had already given me the info, but it was like, no, have to get it from a reputable outside source. I have to get this. So I say all this to say to really start to trust yourself as well with what you think you should do. And like you said, a lot of times when we ask people a question based on what we should do, we're just looking for validation based on what we've already accepted is the thing we know we want to do.
So my question is because again, there's all this, these sayings and things out there. Sometimes you just got to leap, or you just got to trust God, or all of these different things. But the reason why they're so commonplace and said is because people don't do it commonly. It's not something that people literally just do. And so, the question is, how do you start to take that chance? And like again, you're knowing and you're seeing the steps, you're seeing the pathway, but you're still looking for all the. Sometimes you might ask the same question to 13 people just because there's a lack of trust all the way around. Like even if the answer is the same over and over again, well, I just need to get one more person to tell me this. And so, um, how do you start to just build, that trust to make you just dive? Because
Yeah.
it's easier said than done.
Yeah, well, and before I answer that question real quick, answer that question, but it's funny because yeah, like people do wait till they get the answer that agrees with what they think. They can have 100 on one way, but that one that gets weighted and like, oh, but this one person said I should do this. But yeah, it's based on that trust. But to answer your question, it's based on I would say raise your level of awareness, and all that really means is just be aware of what you're saying, of what you're thinking, of what you're doing. So like again, some people ask negative ended questions where the answer can only be something detrimental to them. Like, why me? Why does this keep happening to me? Why does this always happen to me? Why do I always have bad luck? Or why do like all of this where it's only one way you can answer? Like whatever you ask, you're gonna receive an answer to it. So by you asking yourself these questions, you're gonna start receiving all these answers for it. When you can flip the question, you can ask the opposite question. But even before asking the opposite, I would just say take pause and just be aware of what you're asking and what you want. Like, what's the purpose of you asking this question? What's the actual answer that you're looking to receive? And will you trust it if you get it from that source that you actually ask?
So this is a big thing that I've had multiple talks with friends about, family, my wife, just everybody. And the key thing that I hear you say, but it's also the thing that I think is know what you're doing, right? Know what you're doing. And the reason why I say it like that is because the conversation that I have over and over again, even I'm gonna use my wife as an example. We don't understand how much we internalize things. Like we think things, whether we realize it or not, we think things through to every detail of how it looks in pertaining to our life all the time, right? But what we give out is only a 15-second clip or a summary of that whole thought process. And so if you think about how detailed you thought about your process, but the sum of the question, the person that you're asking can never understand, right? And so when I say know exactly what you're doing, with you knowing exactly what you're doing and recognize it, you would also understand that the people that you're asking the question do not know what you're doing. Like they don't know the plan. They don't understand the vision. And so my wife can come to me and she can tell me in short, this is what I want to do. What you think about this? And my answer can never match up. And there could be frustration that builds because she's like, I don't get why you were saying that because it don't make sense. And I'm like, well, how come it don't make sense? Because in her sum, based off of my internal makeup, the way that I think of everything, I at that moment developed an entire process myself as fast as I possibly can, right? And our visions are not the same. And so you got to think when you're talking to someone, they create a vision too. And it's not the same as you. And so when I go back to what I said in the beginning is if you recognize that you know everything, and when I say know everything about your plan, it also helps you to open up that door to the other opportunity in it for your answer. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, and to even if you still want to ask the original person, even to include that in the question and at least set a bit of parameters to allow an answer to come through. So like the question you asked, like how can we make $1 million, right? It depends on how soon. It depends on legal or illegally. You know what I mean? Like somebody could be like, you could ask a drug kingpin, just sell a bunch of drugs, but like, nah, I don't want to make $1 million that way. So it's like knowing the, like you said, know what you're doing, know the details of it, know who you're asking, and based on the perception of the person that you're asking, like give them those parameters, give them those things in mind and say, oh, keep in mind, there's this, I'm coming at it from this way. Here's the question. And go ahead.
No, and knowing that, again, when I say know it, realize that you're an expert in your pathway. Like you are an expert. Like I have no clue. You are an expert in your pathway. There are tons of real estate brokerages like me that have tons of agents, and I can look at their blueprint and I can follow their blueprint step for step. But then there's elements of my life that's not going to make it easy because I grew up and my mom took care of me. And now I also have a wife and 2 kids. Maybe when they built their brokerage, following these steps, they didn't have any kids. Like you're an expert in your pathway. So that means you're an expert in the solutions for it as well. Go ahead, Jay.
And to that, like you said, like we'll give someone the power to answer a question that we want an answer to because we feel they're qualified. Yet then when they give us an answer that we don't like, we try to take that power back. And that's why I like what you said is you're the expert because you don't realize you're both the expert for the question you're asking and you're both an expert for the question for the answer you're receiving. Like Amy said earlier, for the choice, like you have that choice. You are the expert at the choice, but we rob ourselves of that, and then we set up a not intentionally, but we set up some kind of distrust between us and the person we asked that we then said, nah, you're not talking about what I want to hear right now. But it's like, well, then why did you ask me? You know?
Now I'm gonna go back to again, and I like I said, I agree with Amy too. But again, a lot of this is just recognizing yourself. Listen, every plan I've ever had, every choice that I've ever, decision of things that I was going to do, I always saw multiple pathways. Like I'm talking about in vision, in real estate, right? I've literally saw myself in my mind walk a path of being a millionaire. And then I've also saw a path in my mind of going to be a millionaire and then all the hurdles that I've had to climb. I've also saw a pathway of not becoming a millionaire, but being okay. Like it's crazy that I've been able to internalize it. Now, this is just me expressing what I can recognize in myself. But we've all saw we plan for shortcomings, based off of what we think they're going to be. When you're forecasting a business, you say, well, I know that in the summertime, more people move. So I'm going to have more business in the summer, right? That's what you expect. But all my summers have been different, right? But I forecasted a certain way and it didn't look like that way. But I also had where if my summer is not good, this is what I'm going to do during my summer. And that's what I've always done. But I see it all. And I think that we all see it all. We all have we all, of course, we highlight the best case scenario. That's the one that we talk about with all our friends. That's the one we share with everybody. But in ourselves, we highlight everything else, but we never talk about it. But again, that's where all the answers kind of lie, because all those pathways, there's an answer to move from one to the other, no matter if we acknowledge it or not. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to remember the one thing I was about to say to that. The proper way, I guess if there is a proper way to ask questions is, one, are you really are you really able to totally trust the one you're asking? So like really ask yourself that first. Like, are you willing to trust the answer? Because if not, it's really pointless, purposeless to ask the question. So like, for example, I attribute a lot of my spiritual growth to a book called A Course in Miracles, which is said to be a channeled writing from Jesus. And when I read it, when I was led to, I was like, man, this is truth. Like I trust this, like full on. And in that, it gives you a process to kind of get outside of your preconceived notions, because you like, how can you become wiser if you're stuck in a system where you think you're not wise? You know what I mean? Like it's impossible unless you receive outside help in that point. And one of the, like, they have these lessons and exercises that you do. And one of the first ones, it almost seems like, well, what am I doing? But it has you look around the room and say, like, I don't know what this phone means. I don't know what these scissors mean. I don't know. And it's getting you to release your definitions of all of these preconceived notions, that because you've judged the world. And since you've judged the world and everything in it, you gave everything meaning. But then when you realize you don't like the world, you're saying you don't like yourself, because you've then given everything its meaning anyway. So all you really see is you. And when you start to realize that and break down and get outside of that and accept outside help from somebody from a higher vantage point, it's important that you trust them, because if you don't, you'll just be stuck where you are. So I'm not saying not to ask questions. I'm just saying, when you ask a specific question to a specific person or entity, make sure you're ready to fully accept the answer that is given.
Yeah, it's just hearing that is, again, it's a crazy thought when you talk about giving something a judgment or giving something a power and deeming it all the whiz. You know what I'm saying? Like you giving it the power of the whiz, but then at the same time questioning the power, like questioning yourself and the power that you've given something, right? And that's why it all comes back to you. That's why I keep saying that, like, and I'm talking about myself as well, because again, I've seen myself. Again, I don't ask many questions, but sometimes I do. And when I think about the questions that I've asked, I'm not talking about going to an expert. Like, if I need legal help, I go talk to a lawyer, because some things that they study specifically, I know that they're going to have the answer that I haven't figured out how to answer that yet. But sometimes you ask a question, bro, and you don't even, like, that trust. You have to we got to figure out a way to build up that trust in ourselves, right? Like, because it's not that it's not there. Because when I use the example of an attorney, like, I trust myself to trust an attorney.
Right.
You know what I mean? Go ahead, Jay.
And that's what I was gonna say. Like, we don't realize whatever we trust is going to be right for us as long as we trust it wholeheartedly. So even me saying A Course in Miracles, I chose to trust it. I chose to put my power in that to allow it to help me. Like, but I'm still the one that's giving it its power. Like, and so for example, I don't take medicine or pills. I don't believe they'll work. So even if I took one, it's not going to have any effects. I even tested that, and it's like, this does nothing. Why did I even take this? Because I don't believe in it. But if I did, I would take it. There's nothing wrong with taking it. And sometimes like the miracle that we can share with one another is to show that there are multiple ways to do this and still achieve a goal, and really just to trust the one that has the highest vibration within you. Like, man, I really feel I should do this, but I don't know this, I don't know that. Do it, follow it. It's there for a reason, because like it resonates highly with you. It can't help but have positive effects.
I was just talking to TJ, which is my 12-year-old. Well, he'll be 12, next week. And I literally told him this morning, like, bro, this is your world. Like, I know that I'm here, you know what I'm saying? But like, this is your world. And what I don't ever want to see you do is sit back and feel like anything that you wanted, any questions that you like, you don't have an opportunity to have them because you're in control of it all. And then the reason why I'm saying it now is because, again, when we talk about power, and I want to talk about perfect mode again, I start the show out by telling everybody you are perfect. And the only reason you would say that you're not perfect is if you're looking at somebody else and saying, I'm not them. And also, just to kind of go a step further, when we're talking about the answer is always in your question. And I just said that you're an expert in your pathway. I cannot have your answer. I can have an answer. I can have multiple answers, but I can't have yours. I can have suggestions. I can have ideas. And the reality again is that with you being an expert in your life and it being your world, and you giving all these things, all these powers, but yet and still not trusting, you said source, and I'm gonna say you not even giving yourself a chance to say, even if my answer is not the right, again, you've already looked at all the pathways anyway. If this is not the right answer, this is what's going to happen. If it's a little bit of the right answer, this is how it's going to happen. If it's the right answer, this is how it's going to happen. If it's this is how I'm going to feel. But just to not even give yourself the opportunity to see your pathway operate in the way that you're thinking it first is something that we have to work on getting past. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. And one thing I would say in what you said, I feel like you could have the answer, but again, it's like you said, it comes from intention. The intention that so the intention of the person, like you said, first they need to understand what it is they actually want and know that they're asking the right person that can either get them closer or they should only really ask the person that has the answer, or they should rephrase the question and say, what will get me closer to finding the answer to this? But also, as the one who gets asked the question, you can set the intention for yourself as well that together we're going to pull this answer out of me for you. But it's not that I am the supreme answer holder. I'm connecting with you to draw out the answer that best fits the situation for what's best. But it can only come from that trust. And if you don't have that trust from the beginning and you just simply asking a question or a loaded question to try to trip somebody up, you'll never get to where you're trying to go.
And so the funny thing is, when sometimes people don't ask a question, what some people lead in with, well, if that was me, this is how I would do that, right? And that's the reason why I said I can have, you're right, I could potentially have the answer, but that's going to be based off of your path, right? And that's only by chance, I feel like, because this is the reality of it. I've been talking about an attorney, but let's say, for instance, I have a legal situation going on. Now, we all know that I can go in court and represent myself, right? Now, this is when I talk about the pathways. I could come to you and say, Jay, you think I should get an attorney? I'm telling you that this question is not necessary, and I'm going to tell you the reason why. Because the reality of it is, I know that I can represent myself, and I know that if I represent myself, I could potentially lose some favor from the judge. I can still win, but I can potentially lose some favor from the judge. I can potentially be in a situation where I don't know an answer or how to respond, right? So again, and this is just me telling you right now at the top of my head, but I can see all these things happening. I also know that if I get an attorney, I can win, I can lose, I can learn. Like I know. Now the thing is, in my pathway that I'm an expert of, what do I have time for? Do I have time to be in this situation this way? Do I have time to be in it this way? Do I have time to be in it this way and this way? Okay. All right. Do I have time to have emotional input this way? Emotional input this way, emotional input this way. Like all of these things are now again, you can give a suggestion. Hey, Troy, I think you should get an attorney because that's the only way that we always going to answer with because we're giving reasoning based off of how I feel. And so that's the reason why you being an expert in your own pathway have to understand which factors are the most important to you. Now, the suggestion J. Clay gives me may help me move toward one of those answers, but the true answer is all my answers are the right answer. There's not a wrong answer that I can give myself. Because I understand all the pathways. And the thing is, it's just about. Oh, go ahead, Jay.
Well, so to that, because I was about to say, like, in times like that, the answer that I would, if I remember to check in the right way, as I said before, my answer would be one that frees the limits. So, like, for example, you said you know all the pathways, but you may not. I mean, you know the pathways from your viewpoint, but that's part of it. Like, we don't know, we know things, but there's a world that we don't know that if we allow ourselves to open up to it, we can receive the miracle. Like, wow, I didn't even know that was possible. I didn't know that could happen.
And so I'll add to that, right? So now this takes us back to the beginning of the show, and you said that you have to know the question is important. The question that you're asking is important. Now, if I come to you and say, Jay, bro, you know the way my life set up, man. I need to get this done as soon as possible. This is my scenario, and this is the outcome that I want. And I don't want, like, so now my question is different.
Yeah.
It's not just, hey, this is a scenario, should I get an attorney? Now my question is more detailed, it's more thoughtful, it's more specific, it's more all-encompassing. So that now the thing is, you still don't know my complete plan, but now you have an idea of the pathway that I want to take. And now when you know the pathway that I want to take, now I'm giving you an opportunity to not only answer it, to put me on my pathway, to help me walk down my pathway, but not only that, give me the ideas for the source to maybe help me to see something that I couldn't see along my path. Now I'm getting a little insight based off, well, if you were in this situation and you were walking this path, how can I potentially get there for certain? Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. And so, and it sounds like, again, it comes down to purpose, like really knowing your purpose for doing something. So like, okay, so like, let's use the question that you were asking, like, what path should I take? Like that's kind of open-ended, but like, what's your purpose? What are you trying to get at? So like, you know, I would ask follow-up questions before actually trying to answer, but even in me asking follow-up questions is leading to them realizing they had the answer all along. And like, even when I said before, that's what I try to do when I answer, but it's based on me remembering who I am. I think that's what we get to do for each other in conversation. Like that should be the only purpose for conversation, is to reaffirm one another, to recognize and remember who we actually are, how powerful we actually are. And then not only that, when we do that, just by association, we receive that power too. Like if I'm talking to powerful beings, they must have me in high regard, because why else would they bother talking to me? But when we see others as powerful beings as well, that's what we then become. And so that's why it's important that when we ask the question to a person, we trust that they have the answer to give, and we phrase it in such a way that we allow a answer that's not limited by our current interpretation of the situation to flow through.
So to piggyback on what you're saying, and that's where I'm gonna bring it back to us. You said when I'm talking to these powerful beings, I 100% concur with you when you say if I can trust them, then I will realize that in myself. And I'm also saying that you have to start trusting that you're a powerful being now, right? Because that's where questions start to come in. When you start to see the limitations in yourself, you also pick limitations in other people. You also can see how they cannot have the answer because you haven't recognized your power. You haven't recognized how much you really know. Like again, in us having this conversation today, I've recognized today, like before today, I didn't know. I've recognized how much more I knew in my own mind, and I'm like, dang. And then I'm looking at again, even in my lack of asking questions from people, the questions that I have asked, now I'm asking myself a question: was it necessary? You know what I'm saying? And again, it's not to have any regrets, but it's just to show you that like you've already put yourself in the box if you haven't given yourself that opportunity. Again, I'm not advocating for not asking questions either. That's what I said earlier. Like, ask questions, but ask yourself first. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, and I'm all about asking a bunch of questions, but like you said, it's purposeful questions, and it's to who I believe can answer it. So the thing about questions, like, and I said earlier, be mindful of the questions you ask that can only be answered in a negative way. But that doesn't mean it's a bad question to ask, because it's a real question if you're really interested in being aware of the answer. So you might ask like, why haven't I succeeded yet, for an example? And if you're doing it from a place of pity, like, man, why don't I ever succeed? You don't care for the answer, and you're just mindlessly asking questions for no reason, and you're kind of losing your ability. But if you say, why haven't I succeeded yet? And you really look at the answers that come up, now you can do something with it. Like, you're not afraid to look at the answers to the questions that you have of yourself. So again, the question is not necessarily bad. It's what you do with it and your purpose for having it. Like, a question can help lead you out of a small mindset to a big one. Because sometimes I've asked myself, like, why do I feel this way? Is because you're asking questions like this when you could be asking a happy question. And so it's just funny, but go ahead.
No. I love that because the inflection in which you said it was just the change in what you said. But I also, again, that's the reason why I point out pathway, because if you're expressing even to yourself, whether you're talking to somebody or you're talking to yourself, if you're expressing the pathway that you want, that's going to help you determine the right answer. And so, like when you said, why do I keep failing at this? Now the idea is obviously you're doing something a certain way and you don't want to stop doing it the way that you're doing it, but you want to succeed. So the question would be, how can I do it this way and be successful? Right? Because you don't want to change what you're doing, but you want to be successful at it. And again, it's the same thing when you're communicating with somebody. Again, who really wants to go into that much depth in a question? But then the reality of it is, it's that deep. I mean, that's the reason why when I use the scenario with me and my wife, like, we don't recognize, Troy and you and everybody listening don't recognize how much we internalize things. We live with every single thing we do. When we mad at somebody, we're mad at them until they're not mad no more. And we think about every detail of being mad. When I see them, this is how it's gonna be. If they do, like, we can come up with a million scenarios on our responses alone, let alone body language. Whenever they're around me, I'm gonna be like this. Like, you don't think that literally, but your body is internalizing every single aspect of the relationship. we're internalizing every single aspect of a goal. We're internalizing all these things consistently on autopilot. And so, like, when you're trying to answer a question, you have internalized it all these ways. And a lot of times, to your point, we've been internalizing all the negative aspects of it and not the positive or the promiseful or the productive or the winning. Like, we will highlight the winning to everybody else. Guess what? I'm trying to do this by the end of this year, guys. Boom. But immediately when I finish thinking about that, okay, man, but if this don't happen, and if I don't do this, and all of this stuff, and again, it might not be something that's in the forefront of my mind, but every single time something that pops up, that's what I'm living with. And so if you're going to ask the question, like you said, phraseology of it or inflection is everything. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. And the statement asking you shall receive is 100% true, which is why again it's important to ask the right questions and be willing to accept the answer. Because if you're just asking the question mindlessly, the answer you receive is that don't answer any of my questions. Nobody, like, I don't care what anybody says. I'm just gonna do my thing whether it hurts me or not. Like that's the kind of thing. But there've been instances where I've asked the higher power a question, instant answer every time, but it's like, nah, I don't think you heard me because it's not the answer that I might want. And it's like, let me rephrase this, because you will always get that answer if you allow it and if you listen for it, in multiple ways. So it's key to choose your questions wisely.
Look, I'm a shout out. I'm not gonna say their name, but shout out to somebody that I know. They might actually be listening, and if you listen, holler. But funny, they told me a story about going through some things and them asking God a question and asking for something and not being specific, right? And the best way that I can explain it was they asked for an out and a reset. And what they end up getting was an out and a reset, right? But that mug definitely wasn't what they wanted, not the way that they wanted it. And they recognized, like, dang, I got what I wanted, but not the way that I wanted it. But not, and so the reason why I say that is because when we talk about these questions and the way we internalize it, even when talking to God, now God knows your heart, God knows everything, but that doesn't mean you're asking what you want. And for us to be more thoughtful, shouts out, for us to be more thoughtful, shouts out to my girl Angela, who appreciate you joining us today. But for us to be more thoughtful as much as we internalize things. Like, there's nothing wrong with being that specific for yourself.
And
right? Oh, go ahead, Jay.
well, and like even when asking for God, like to God, like the example you gave where it wasn't the way they wanted. It could depend on the type of answer they thought God would give. They could have thought God would give an answer that they didn't want, and so that happened. But at the same time, like if you fully trust, like you said, God knows your heart. If you fully trust, even if it doesn't look like, if it looks like the worst possible thing, yet you trust it without tagging it or deeming it or defining it as the worst possible thing, it will not be the worst. It will be one of the best things ever. And I've seen this many a times in my life, like, wow, I would have never thought to do this, but since you said it, I did it, and it led to this, which led to this, which led to this, and this is beautiful.
But the thing is, I think my friend realized that. You know what I'm saying? Because again, expectation is one thing, but reality is just, reality sometimes takes a second for you to adjust to, right? But that's the same thing when it comes to asking yourself the question. Like, you've already seen all the possible scenarios. You don't know. Go ahead, Jay.
Well, not, I wouldn't say all, based on your current level of understanding.
Right. So based on your current, and they go to the point of you don't know what God is going to do. You just got to trust. So even with yourself, you have to just trust that you always have the right answer. You always have the right answer. There's no other way that it could go. You just got to trust the process by which that comes with it. But I know we're at that time, man. And just kind of recap, just for myself, I would encourage myself, and I would encourage anybody, recognize that recognize and understand that you understand where you want to go. Recognize that you think about it more than anybody else, right? And what Jay is saying, think about the question and the way that you ask it. Think about how you can change the way that you're looking at it. And just remember, go ahead, Jay.
And one thing too to that to add that I didn't get to, not only should you pay attention to the question that you're going to ask, but who you're asking it to, but not only that, the perspective you have of yourself when asking the question.
Question, real talk, man. Like that, man. That's. I'm just gonna say this: the perspective that you should have for yourself, and I'm talking to myself, is that I'm a powerful being. You know, the perspective that you should have for yourself is that you are a powerful being. So yeah, I'll leave it there, and I'm going to end in saying, that we all perfect, man. Like my life ain't supposed to look like Jay Clay's life. So even if sometimes Jay Clay is smiling, and I'll be like, man, I wish I was smiling too. You know what I'm saying? The reality of it is, if I stop and ask myself the question, how can I smile right now? I'm gonna get an answer. I don't have to ask Jay Clay, how are you smiling right now? Or what are you doing to smile right now?
That's true.
But trust in yourself. Trust in what you see for yourself. Trust in where you want to go. Know that no matter which part of your pathway you fall on, that you're still going to reach your end result. Because I know one thing that I know about myself, and me talking about all the pathways that I've seen, all the ones that I've allowed myself to have, they all end at the same spot. They all end at the same spot, because the other side is not the one that I, again, intentionally in my conscious mind, allow myself to dwell on. Maybe it's somewhere in my subconscious mind, but that's the one that I'm trying to combat every single day. And that's by asking myself the right questions. That's by me reframing the way that I think about them, and me continuously to trust in myself to know that I'm a high-level, intelligent being that can accomplish anything in my own way. Go ahead, Jay.
So yeah, appreciate y'all, like everyone that joined us on this, everyone that's helped us go through the journey of asking the question of how the answer is always in the question, and then being able to answer it, because it's definitely a collaborative thing. If you found this helpful in any way, hit that share button. If you're watching this on YouTube, on the replay, hit that subscribe, all of that, like it. And so next week, there will be no Perfect Mode next week, no Perfect Mode episode. I'll be in DC. I'm performing and giving a talk at the IANS conference. It's gonna be awesome. And
congratulations, brother.
What'd you say?
I say congratulations, man.
I appreciate you. And but make sure y'all just watch another episode that y'all missed, next week. One of the ones you missed, tune into that. And just remember, y'all, we are all a perfect creation made by a perfect creator. So you might as well accept your perfection and enter perfect mode.
If I reminded you that you are perfect, would you argue me down or step into your perfection? Welcome to Perfect Mode, where there are no excuses, no expectations, and we explore the world without limitations. I'm Jay Clay, rapper and spiritual teacher, with my co-host Troy Washington, your friendly neighborhood realtor. Let's be real, so let's be perfect.